Hello everyone, and welcome to the DFAT ANCP Performance Reporting webinar. I'm Vicky at EFIS Learning Team. If you can hear me, could you please press the raise hand button to confirm the sound is coming through? Oh, great, thank you. Yep, I can see a lot of hands there. Before I hand over to our speakers, I'll go over some housekeeping matters. First, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to EFIS YouTube channel. When the link is ready, I'll email it to everyone. Second, during presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function to type in your questions. This is also where you can see this question submitted by other people. Without further ado, I'll now hand over to Mighty, our presenter.
Thank you so much, Vicky. Hi, everyone. It's Mighty Horton from the ANCP operations team. And I'm also joined by Helen Turner from the ANCP operations team. And special thank you to Vicky and all of the team at ACFID. We really do appreciate their support every year in being able to present these webinars to you and being able to reach you in this way. So let me get up my presentation and get underway. Really, today's going to be very much a focus on the performance report and acquittal process and the submissions that you guys need to give us through Smarty Grants for the 2018-19 financial year, due on the 30th of September. So what I will do quickly at the beginning of today is going through and reminding you. I know many of you have done performance reports before, but some of you are new to it as well. But I'll remind you what we use performance reports for, why we ask you to prepare that information and provide it to us, and try and give you some hints on what we're really looking for in the information that you provide us, and to make it a great performance report that really adequately reflects the wonderful work that you're doing in the field. I'll also just go through key changes to the forms since last year. If you've had a chance to have a look at them already, hopefully you've noticed that they're not huge changes since last year. And then we'll also just go through those logistics, how to submit it via Smarty Grants, hopefully without throwing up any errors for you. As Vicky said at the beginning, and as always, we're happy to take your questions throughout the presentation. So feel free to put your questions in so that we can answer them right then when we're talking about that section or that topic. But of course, there's plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So feel free to ask your questions either way. We've got 1 hour for today, so I'm going to plough through and hopefully we'll get finished on time, and I won't talk for too long. So I did want to give a quick plug for the ANCP program information sessions that are coming up next week and the week after. For those of you who are accredited NGOs, you've hopefully received your invitation for the session on the 6th of August in Melbourne. That's next week on Tuesday. And then next week, Wednesday, the 7th of August in Sydney. Those are at the DFAT state offices. And then for people who love Canberra, we will be having a session in Canberra as well on Monday, the 12th of August in the afternoon. So at those sessions, yes, we'll be going through ANCP performance reports, but there'll be a lot more information and discussion as well. So we've got Tony Hunt from the Child Protection and PSEAH team coming along, and she's going to provide some updates on broader safeguards, but also in particular on the PSEAH policy and guidance notes. We'll be talking, providing you some updates on the ANCP program, where things have moved on since we last all physically got together in March. We'll provide some just collective ad plan feedback now that we're coming to the end of the ad plan assessment process. And we'll be talking about hosting DFAT monitoring visits in a bit more detail as well. So if you haven't RSVP'd already, we really strongly encourage you to come along to a Melbourne, Sydney or Canberra session, and you can send in your RSVP to the ANCP Mailbox. Or if you haven't got the invitation and you really need it, please also drop us a line at the ANCP Mailbox. So let's talk about performance reports. I know many of you have been through the process before, but for those of you who haven't, Here's kind of the little journey that we go on in the month of October. So you will all be submitting your performance reports via ANCP Online, via Smarty Grants, on the 30th of September. I believe it's a Monday this year. The round is definitely closing at 5 p.m. on Monday, the 30th of September. Within the first couple of days of October then, the ANCP team at DFAT will go through and do some checks to make sure that all of the information that you have provided is full and complete. Within that first week of October, we do have some urgent data that we need to use out of the system. So we may well come back to you in the first day or so and ask you to correct errors. Things like if your dollars aren't adding up correctly, or there's a form that hasn't been submitted or something like that. After that first week is over, we'll move on and we'll do an assessment of everyone's header information that you've provided to us. And then we'll review a sample of your project level reports. We tend to take a risk-based approach, and we focus on projects that have been particularly high risk or high profile, or have had maybe an issue associated with them, or projects where we've seen significant variation to what you committed in the ad plan to deliver. We will then, towards the end of October, or potentially progressively throughout the sort of latter couple of weeks of October, be preparing assessment reports on your ad plans and sending them out to you. At that stage, when we send you your assessment report, we don't often ask for people to make adjustments to their performance reports. It's not the same as the ad plan process. But if there are, significant bits of information that are missing, or just errors, things aren't adding up correctly, we might ask you to adjust, but that's pretty rare. So normally by the end of October, the whole process is done and dusted, and we invite you to submit your tranche 2 invoice to us. And of course, the reminder that I'm probably going to remind you 10 times throughout today's presentation is that once we've got to that point of finalising your performance report, we will be publishing details to the DFAT website. So there'll be information available publicly on your projects and your expenditure against them. And then we'll also be putting full details of your performance report on DFAT's intranet, so that our DFAT colleagues at posts with informatic teams and so forth have access and the ability to read the wonderful results that you share with us. So just some mechanics and logistics. A reminder that the performance reports are due at 5 p.m. on Monday, the 30th of September. It is definitely not midnight, 5 o'clock. And we know that there are different public holidays in Victoria and New South Wales and ACT around that time. So please do make allowances for those public holidays wherever you are located, and work backwards. If there's going to be some sort of issue in you meeting the deadline to submit, please let us know early. The more time and the more advance notice you give us, the better. Obviously, as I said before, we've got some quite urgent data we need to report on within the first week of October. So extensions for us are incredibly challenging. So it's our hope that we won't have any requests, but if you've got some sort of emergency, let us know as soon as possible. A reminder too that after sort of business hours on Monday, the 30th of September, we won't have technical Smarty Grants help available. Same thing over the weekend, there's no Smarty Grants help desk. So it's good to just factor that and keep that in mind, so that, should you have any issues with the system, that we've got enough time to resolve it before 5 o'clock on Monday, the 30th of September. I've put in here the link for ANCP Online, the link to the 2018-19 round, where you can access your performance report submission. And we have sent that out. When we sent the email out to all NGOs advising that the round was open, that link was in that email, so you should have that to follow. Finally, just a note about the authorisation form at the header level. We have an authorisation form attached to the header. And one of the things that we really hope to see is that the person who has prepared the ANCP performance report isn't the same person that sort of signs off that authorisation. What we're really looking for here is some evidence that there's executive oversight of your report that you're providing to DFAT to acquit the DFAT funds, the taxpayer dollars that you've spent in the previous years. So where possible, we like to see some separation of that responsibility and demonstration of oversight. Let's move on to the. Sorry, I'm going to go back. One last thing on the mechanics that I should have mentioned. It's always the Smarty Grants question that we get asked is, in what order should I submit all of my forms? And what you should do is type up all of your project and program and header level reports and hit save on all of them, but don't hit submit. And then go into your header and check to see if there's any calculation errors or any error messages that are throwing up for you in your header. If there are errors, it might be because numbers aren't tallying up correctly and so forth out of your projects. And so if you've saved those project level reports, but you haven't submitted them, then it's really easy for you to open up your project reports and go in and make those changes. So you can go in and make amendments if you need to. And then if everything's good, you're not getting any error messages there at the header level, then you can go through and hit submit on your header and all of your projects without any problems. If you do accidentally submit your project and then you realise you need to make a change to it, just get in contact with the ANCP team and we can reopen that form for you. Let's move on. Let's move on to the purpose of the performance reports. So obviously, when you give us your ad plan in June each year, you are telling us what you intend to deliver for the coming financial year using your ANCP funds. So the performance report is really an opportunity for you to then tell us about what you've achieved and how you've gone in your delivery of that project that you committed to in the ad plan. So I guess the key point of performance reports is that acquittal and the accurate record of what happened on the ground with that project, so that DFAT can maintain accurate records of how aid funds were spent. It also means that should there be any sort of audit or compliance review or whatever that is made by DFAT or by yourselves, that you have this record that you can then check and audit against. Also, we heavily rely on your performance report information to undertake our ANCP corporate reporting. So for any DFAT program, we've got to fit in with our quality assurance process and be able to confidently report to the Australian public how their aid funds have been spent. So we do extract a lot of data out of the performance reports and we produce public-facing documents like the aid program performance report, or as we're now calling it now, the ANCP snapshot. It's a public document that talks about the collective achievement of all 57 NGOs under the ANCP, and it's published to the DFAT website there for everyone to see the results that our program and all of your projects collectively together have achieved. We also must report an aid quality check, which is an internal report that goes all the way up to the ministerial level to be able to talk about the effectiveness, the value for money, the safeguards, the cross-cutting issues, and how we've addressed all of those in our programming and collectively together within our program. The aid quality check is a set template that we must follow, and all aid programs follow that same template. And there is a lot of influence on the way that we are collecting the header level data at the moment in particular, that allows us to use your header level data to respond to those different questions and information fields that we have to use in that aid quality check. In addition, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Senate estimates and budget estimates. Anytime we are preparing briefing material for our senior executive to appear at Senate estimates, we are using your acquitted performance report data. Similarly, for the 11 NGOs that receive a partner performance assessment, we will use a lot of your performance report information to inform what we include in that partner performance assessment on an annual basis. The other thing we rely on acquitted data for is briefings. So for our senior executive, for other programs that are delivering projects with NGOs or delivering bilateral programs, and in particular for the Minister, we draw heavily from your performance report information to prepare briefs for those key internal senior executive and the ministers. We provide your performance reports to posts and thematic areas. We use them as background when we are undertaking M&E visits to your projects. And we also rely on your information to figure out public communications or contributions that we might make to Australian aid or in fact whole of government reports. I just wanted to remind or let you know maybe an insight as to how often the ANCP team is contacted by our colleagues within the department to look for examples or data. So looking for examples that might be country specific or sector specific, you know, great examples that we might have to share that could be a success story, or they might be looking for data like how much money did we spend on climate adaptation or how much money did we spend on health in the Pacific. And we really heavily rely on your data and we rely on your great examples. So when we've got a great example that we know about from your performance report, we're likely to highlight it in things like whole of government reports. So it's a worthy investment of your time to have high quality performance reports. I'm just going to remind you at this point before I switch to a different screen of the ANCP team contacts. Of course, they haven't changed recently, but the ANCP mailbox is there. Really, in the first instance, you can direct most of your queries about performance reports to the ANCP mailbox. If you have a purely technical issue along the lines of the system has crashed or my logon no longer works or I'm getting error messages that just don't make sense, then you can email the Smarty Grants team, the Smarty Grants unit within DFAT, and the address is there. But the Smarty Grants team really can't help you answer questions like, what type of information are you hoping that I'm going to put in this information field? They really just run the technical side, and it's the ANCP team who can otherwise help you with the type of information or how to answer your questions and structure your report. So they're the key contacts there. What I'm really going to do now is leave the PowerPoint presentation behind, and I'm going to jump into the actual Smarty Grants system, into a preview of our forms, and I'm going to start with the header. Now I'm going to start with the header. Even here is even better for you. And I'm just going to go through today the header level report and then the project level report. I'm not going to spend time going through the program report because it's incredibly straightforward, but I'm going to go through each of the questions and try and give you some tips as to what we're looking for there. With the header, in summary, at the header level, we are really looking for that executive summary level information. So collectively across your whole ANCP portfolio, we're looking for you to respond to the questions as a whole and to be specific about the 2018-19 financial year. So we don't want here for you just to be including 3 individual unrelated examples from 3 different projects in our narrative report. Instead, we're really looking for you to give us an executive summary as to across your ANCP portfolio and with your ANCP grant in total, how you can respond to each of these questions that we provide to you. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've got very few changes this year, and the changes we have made have shortened the form. I think next year, expect to see some significant changes within the header level performance report. As we've been going through the process, which so many of you have been involved in, of refreshing the monitoring, evaluation and learning framework for the ANCP, we've had a lot of discussions about what type of information and the format we should be gathering that information to be able to collectively talk about the value of the ANCP as a program as a whole. So we do expect that we'll make some changes to these forms next year to fall into line with the monitoring, evaluation and learning framework. In the meantime, what we have done is shorten the form a little bit, removed some questions and combined some questions. And that's really in response to the feedback that many of you have given us through the program logic and the monitoring, evaluation and learning framework working group meetings that have been held to date. So we hope you see that reflected in here, but at the same time, we didn't want to change the form too much, only to change it significantly next year for the new MELF. Please do keep involved and stay involved and look out for more information on the MELF refresh. And absolutely in November, when we have the annual reflections and the learning event for the ANCP, we should have it ready to go by then. So get involved between now and then. A reminder as we go through this form and with every form, we have the text in the form, the explanatory text. And in the ANCP team, we do think carefully about the explanatory text and the way that we ask you the question. So have a good read of the question. It'll give you a guide, hopefully, on the type of information that we are looking for. At the top of every form, we always have this reminder about using evidence to support the claims that you make in your response. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the concept of robust evidence, adequate evidence, and weak evidence. But really, where you have monitoring or evaluation or whatever the case might be, research, where that exists, and you can confidently provide that evidence to support the claims that you are making, then please reference that and use it throughout your header and project level reports. Moving on, let's get down to the actual questions. So the first question asks you about the results and achievements that your organisation has had within your ANCP portfolio in the 2018-19 financial year. So here, this is one of the questions where we would really like for you to provide us a summary. Give us a summary, make some claims about what it is in relation to results and achievements, but, you know, point to your effectiveness and programming here, and then back up your claim with one or two examples. Please don't just list the examples without kind of pulling it together at that summary level. So make it a high level summary, make it 2018-19 specific here. We then give you the option in the boxes, the two boxes below, to give us the ANCP project ID number for up to 2 projects that you think are really your great examples of effective programming that you would like us to highlight out, or that if the DFAT team are looking for great examples that we might like to highlight, for example, to a minister of your 2 best or 2 most effective programs, then this would be the place to put those numbers in. You'll note here that we have made it optional this year, so it's not compulsory for you to include those 2 projects, but we're really hoping that you would like to have at least 1 project that you think is your finest example of effective programming. The next question that we go on to is value for money. And this is an opportunity for you to summarise any initiatives or approaches that you have had in 2018-19 to ensure value for money in your ANCP program. Again, here, provide us with some summary information and then back it up with 1 or 2 examples that give us some evidence to support your claims. This shouldn't be a refresh of information that you've provided previously in something like an accreditation OR. Here we really are looking for information that's specific to 2018-19. The questions or the boxes below where you can highlight your project ID numbers, again, are optional. But here in this format below, we're looking for you to give us examples of projects where you have drawn on funding and or expertise from a variety of different sources. So this year we have removed the narrative box. We used to have a place for you to describe to us how you've drawn on funding and expertise from a range of sources, but we found that the narrative that we were getting there didn't help us in our overall program reporting, that it wasn't the type of information that we could use, and that actually the examples that you were giving us were the really great examples that we could highlight in some of our corporate reporting and communications materials. So we've left those 2 boxes in for you to, again, it's optional, be able to highlight to us 1 or 2 examples where you've drawn on funding and expertise from diverse sources. I will say in particular with this one, it should be obvious when we read that project report how it relates to funding and expertise. So if there's no information about how you've used, how you've leveraged those funds or expertise within the narrative of that report, it's going to be difficult for us to understand why you've included it here at the header level. So make sure that that information's in your project report and it's obvious to us why you've included those projects as an example. Underneath the project examples, the header level form is going to automatically suck data out of your project forms and tally it up to show the funds that you have received from other sources, other donor funds. And I'll highlight for you when we go into the project form where that is, but the header here is going to automatically tally up those sources for you. And it's just going to also give you a little percentage there to show that. So you won't need to enter any data here, it'll automatically do it. The next question is your organisation's approach to cross-cutting themes. And again, here, this is another one where we've taken out the narrative descriptive box for you this year, but we've left in here the spot for you to give us up to two really great examples of where you think you've had a great approach to cross-cutting themes. It is optional, but we really hope that all of you are able to show us an example of where you've addressed our cross-cutting themes. And those themes might be, social inclusion, so gender, disability, ethnic minorities, how you've included those kind of those groups and how you've addressed their specific needs in your design, delivery, evaluation of your projects. Similarly, you might be looking at other cross-cutting themes such as climate and the environment, or innovation, or capacity building of your local partners. So there's any of those cross-cutting themes or others that you are working towards across your whole portfolio, please give us your best examples of your projects. The next section then goes into safeguards and staffing issues. So last year we had two separate questions, one where we asked you to talk to us about your approach to safeguards this year, and one where you asked us to report on any staffing issues. This year we've combined them together, and it says here in this question the type of safeguards that you might address for us here, such as environmental protection, child protection, PSEAH, resettlement, Indigenous peoples, work health and safety, and then also to give us any reports on any staff performance or misconduct issues that you may have had during the year. We ask you here to, again, not just restate your general approach that you have and that, we have assessed at your accreditation, but here to really tell us about new initiatives or activities, new work that you delivered in 2018-19. So if you have revised your policy, if you've rolled out some new training, if you have taken a new approach to how you've dealt with issues, then please tell us about it here. And naturally, if you have had examples of staff performance or misconduct, then now is the time for you to tell us about it. I've got a question on the system here, and the question is, do we only report on DFAT funded projects? So across the board, in terms of all of the questions that we've talked about here, we are mostly, of course, interested on the ANCP funded activities that you have done. But we understand for some of the questions, for example, like the safeguards and staffing issues question that we've just talked about, if you've had an overall new approach for your organisation on how you've done child protection, then please include that here, because obviously that's relevant to your ANCP projects as well as your others. But for the most part, we're really looking at a focus on your ANCP projects throughout the header level report. The next questions are perhaps the trickiest ones that we've seen sort of varied responses to in last year, which was the first time that we asked these following questions about program participation and partnership. And really, we just ask you in this section to think about two questions. What has the ANCP done for your organisation? And what has your organisation done for the ANCP? That's really it in a nutshell. So the first question, we ask you to tell us about the contribution that your NGO has made to the ANCP program. So we always say, you know, we're only as strong as the sum of our parts. So here we're talking about, you know, collectively, what have we done to make sure that we can continue to have a long-standing 40-year-long collective supported with taxpayer money program. So here you might think about, was there some learning that you shared with other ANCP colleagues? Did you promote the ANCP and your partnership with DFAT to new audiences? Did you contribute to things like the program logic refresh and the MELF refresh? Have you worked in partnership with other organisations to deliver something? Have you contributed to policy dialogue that has made had a positive contribution to the ANCP program? Now is the time for you to tell us about how you have made the ANCP program stronger because of your participation. The following section then sort of follows on for that and asks you to tell us about where you have communicated about our partnership with the Australian public. So quite specifically here, we're looking for these communications with the Australian public or Australian stakeholders, where you have actively promoted the ANCP partnership to those audiences. It might be broadly in terms of your partnership with DFAT, or it might be quite specifically on the ANCP. So you might be talking about here public materials that you've put out where you've acknowledged, but you might also, put in something about when we had this meeting with this key official, we really talked about the benefit of the ANCP and we really spruiked the positives of the program to that key stakeholder. I've got two questions here that I'll go through here. The first one just says that we've mentioned a great sort of in a nutshell purpose of that question, and it would be great if the description of the question says that as well. So I tried when editing this question this year to put that in at the top, and you'll just see underneath where it says ANCP program participation and partnership, it says that in this section we ask NGOs to consider what the ANCP has done for your organisation and what your organisation has done for the ANCP. So that's in there at the top of that section on the form. The next question says here, it just asks what the word limit is for the NGO contribution to the ANCP program. And that is a wonderful question, and it doesn't appear on the form at the moment. So we'll have to go away and just check with our Smarty Grants colleagues. But I'm going to think it's going to be in the realm of the other similar questions, and around about that 250 words, I think, is what it will be. But we'll get that updated and make sure that that update is shown in the form too before not too long, before next week when we come out for our performance report information sessions. Moving on to the second part of our what did the ANCP do for your organisation and what did you do for the ANCP, is that second part of the question where you can talk to us about the value of participating in the ANCP for your organisation. So here is what did the ANCP do for you? So you might like to talk about here linkages or relationships that being a participant in the ANCP has brought you, whether or not it's improved the practice of your organisation, for example, through accreditation or other means, whether or not the ANCP has allowed you to pilot or trial new approaches and innovations, whether or not the ANCP has allowed you to expand the work of your organisation, whether or not you have been able to use ANCP funds to leverage other grants and to access other funds from sources you may not otherwise have been able to access. There might be any number of things that you would like to explain here, but this is what has the ANCP done for you. So let's move on now. We're getting into the part of the header form that's incredibly straightforward. It's really all of the facts and figures and the data, and there's not a lot that you need to do here. A lot of this data as we come along is going to be automatically tallied up out of your project level forms. I'm just going to go back to one final question from the section before about the value of ANCP participation to your organisation. And the question is, should we focus on what we have done for the ANCP? Can you talk about actual projects or extracurricular events only? So I think you need to, across these two sections in terms of what you have contributed to the ANCP and what the ANCP has contributed to you, you're obviously going to know what the best examples are for your organisation. So within your word count, you choose what you think are the strongest responses that you have and the strongest claims, and then add that in here. So naturally, your projects, we know it sort of goes without saying that your projects and your delivery of your projects contributes to the overall reach that the ANCP has to beneficiaries and in country and things. But every single NGO is able to say that they delivered their projects and collectively those projects led to results. I guess we are looking for some things that go beyond that. So it may be that you were able to use that project to access a new market, or you might be working in a country where there's not many ANCP projects, and it really allowed you to have great dialogue with Post and talk about the ANCP with DFAT colleagues at a High Commission or embassy. So you're going to know your best examples, but I guess there are those that everyone's doing, and then there are those where your organisation might be really wanting to shine and highlight some unique work that you've done. So I'm going to move on then to the beneficiaries section. So you will remember that in the ad plans this year, we haven't asked you to pull out all of the disaggregated data, but we will definitely still be looking for you to be able to disaggregate your data at the performance report level. The disaggregation is exactly the same as last year in terms of gender and disability or sex and disability. At the top of the form, you'll see that it will pull out the expected number of beneficiaries that you had at the ad plan level. This is just a reminder for you to remember what sort of numbers you were putting in your ad plan. And then it gives you the actual. The actual will be, tallied up from all of your project levels. But this is the first step in you remembering what you said back in June 2018 you were going to deliver, or how many people you were going to reach, and then where your actuals have come to by now. All of the following table is pulled up out of your performance report data. The same for Indigenous people and ethnic minorities. When we get down into the budget summary, there's some fields that you're going to have to fill out and others that will be automatically shown for you. So the first section, section A, tells us about how much money you had as on the 1st of July last year, ready to be able to spend for this project. So here in section A, your rollover from the previous year and your rolled over interest from the previous year, and also your ANCP grant amount for 2018-19, that will be pulled out of your ad plan and automatically shown here for you. The only thing you need to put in is the actual interest that you earned during the 2018-19 period. And then it's going to automatically calculate that up for the total funds that you had available for you. I'm going to go back. I've got a question in relation to the beneficiaries, and it says, is there a place for us to explain the differences between expected and actual beneficiaries? And when we come to the project level report, I'll point that out because there definitely is a place for you to show us that. The same also goes for funding. So we'll come to that in the project report. Section B of the budget reporting is your actual expenditure. So again, here, a lot of these numbers are going to be, the data is going to be pulled from your project level report and sucked up into the header. So it's going to tell us how much money you said you spent on each of the projects, plus the rollover you spent, and the interest that you spent and so forth. And that's going to automatically be tallied up here. You will need to put in the actual figure you spent on administration and overheads, and then the unspent dollars that you have from the previous year, the unspent grant dollars that you have, and any interest that you earned in 2018-19 and that you will be rolling over into the 2019-20 period. What I will say at this point is it is completely normal that the figures that you are telling us now that you had available to you in 2018-19 that you didn't spend and you want to roll over into this current financial year 19-20, it's totally normal that what you put in your performance report might not match what you had in your ad plan that you submitted to us on the 30th of June. We know for a lot of you, you're waiting for the detailed acquittals to come from your partner in this 3-month period between ad plans and performance reports. So it may well be the case when we see that your acquittal here, when we see that your rollover amount is different to your ad plan, we'll ask you what adjustments you need to make to your ad plan and which projects we need to open up so that you can adjust funding figures there. As we move on to design, monitoring and evaluation expenditure and also NGO contribution, that's going to be automatically tallied up out of your project level reports. If there's no questions on the finance section, we're moving on to meta evaluations. The meta evaluation, of course, is totally optional. And this is just an opportunity for you to tell us about not individual project evaluations, but where you've taken an evaluation that looks across a certain theme or a topic or at a country level evaluation, or where you've aggregated information from several individual evaluations, then this meta evaluation space is the place for you to tell us about it. If you've done individual project evaluations, there's a spot in the project level form for you to tell us about that. And this, again, this remains unchanged from last year, just a place for meta evaluations for you to upload them and give us some quick snapshot of the data associated with it. Next, we come to the case study. And again, the case study information is the same as last year. It's mandatory to provide, or it's required to provide at least one case study. And then it's optional to provide more than one case study. We obviously would be expecting for you to have a look at your ANCP portfolio. If you're one of the NGOs that has a couple of dozen projects and quite a large grant amount, then we're really hoping that you're going to be able to put a couple of case studies in to demonstrate some of the great change that you've been able to have in your communities. Naturally, if you're a small base NGO and you only have one ANCP project, then yes, it's fine that you've only got one case study. So please just have a think about the scope and size of your grant and your ANCP portfolio and what might be an appropriate number of case studies for you to upload. We absolutely love a picture to go with our case study, and they make any of our materials or comms so much more exciting. So where you've got a good high quality, high resolution photo that we can use, and you've got the permissions for us to be able to reproduce that photo, then please do attach it. Finally, we come to the performance report certification. I've talked about this already before, where it just says the certification template is available here and there's a little hyperlink. Click on that, it'll take you to a Word document. You need to physically print off the Word document, have a suitably senior person within your organisation sign it, and then you need to scan it and upload it into the header form. That brings us to the end of the header level form. And I am quickly now going to switch and we're going to have a little look at the project level form. I think our summary information or our key takeaway message for you here for your project level forms is go back to your ad plan from 2018, from June 2018, have a look what it is that you committed that you were going to deliver with your ANCP grant, and then just report against that. So the very first question that we ask you in the project level form is, were there any variations to your ad plan? So this is the chance for you to tell us about things that you changed, adaptations that you made, and a little bit of background that led to that. So we absolutely understand within the DFAT team that no project in the history of the earth ever has 100% gone precisely according to the plan that you set out at the beginning. Otherwise, it's some kind of miracle. So just be honest here, give us evidence that you've been looking at your projects and adjusting them as you go along to make them suit the context that you are working in. In particular here, have a look at your total funds to this project and also the beneficiaries that you planned to reach, because we do in the team just run a quick report that gives us all of your ad plan and performance report data for funding and also beneficiaries. And we use that as a bit of a guide as the projects that we might want to jump in and take a look at. So where you've gone from 10,000 beneficiaries to 150,000 beneficiaries, and there's no variation for that, to us, it's difficult for us to understand what led to that significant change. Similarly, if you were planning on spending $250,000, but you only actually spent $15,000, just give us that explanation so we can understand what led to that change. Any other change, you should also be detailing for us here. There's some information within this header level that may need to actually be changed within your ad plan should you be making significant changes here. So for example, if you were making a change to the implementing partners, then we would need to change that in the ad plan. So please do let us know so we can adjust the ad plan for the period so we can maintain accurate records. The next section is the project outcomes section. And this year, this is no longer a required field, it is optional. What we would say though is that if 2018-19 was the final year of this project or the final year of a project phase, then it's really essential that you put in an outcome summary to tell us what this project achieved in its lifetime. It is optional for those other projects that aren't continuing, but we really think this is the place where you can tell us about the change that this project is having or the progress that this project is making towards its end goal, how you are in terms of your plan towards achieving those objectives you've told us about in the ad plan. If, for those projects that you do really think that DFAT might like to pull out and highlight and reference, those ones that you've put in the header level as being your effective programs that are your best and brightest, then it's probably a really good idea for you to include some information here on project outcomes, because otherwise when you've made your claims that this is your most effective program, we won't have much narrative to read to help us understand why this is your best example. We get on to then the outputs for the year. And what we've done this year is automatically from the ad plan, from your 2018-19 ad plan, it's going to suck the data out of your ad plan form just for the 2018-19 year and show you what you said you were going to deliver this year with this project. And then it gives you the opportunity to say, well, for 2018-19, here's what we actually delivered. So this is where you tell us about how you used your ANCP funds and what activities you actually delivered on the ground. The next question is very similar to last year and many years before, and this is where you tell us about issues or challenges, so actual things that have happened on the ground that may have impacted your ability to deliver outcomes or activities for the project. Again, this year we've made this question optional instead of compulsory, but it's your chance to be just frank and honest and to demonstrate to DFAT that you are monitoring your project and you understand what the challenges and the realities are of this project on the ground. If you have had a fraud case or a child protection case or any other major issue associated with this project, if we've been talking about it, we will be reading we will be checking this project ad plan and checking to see that you have kept a record and made a record to us in your acquittal here of that particular issue that's arisen. So do be sure if you've had a fraud or a child protection or any other sort of issue with a project that you're putting something in this optional field. And then similarly with the lessons learnt field, again, this is also optional this year for the first time rather than required. So here within the lessons learnt section, yes, you can tell us about major issues that you've had, and we definitely like to see when you've had a major issue that you've then taken some sort of lesson away, that you've been able to either apply to that project in particular or to that partner, or maybe even more broadly across your ANCP programming, or in fact, your entire NGO's way of working. But similarly here, if you've had something that has worked really, really well that you would like to share with us, here's a great chance to share those positive lessons as well, your successes, rather than just the lessons that you've learnt the hard way through issues arising. The next section relates to innovation. This is exactly the same questions that we've had as last year. And if you check the box to say, yes, our project has had some sort of innovation involved with it, if you check yes, then the question will open up underneath and give you a chance to explain to us what that innovation was, and for you to tell us all about it. Again, for any project that you have listed in the header and you've said this is a really great example of us doing something, then you might want to use this question to give you that space in the narrative to be able to explain to us what that wonderful approach was. For example, if you've, in the value for money section or the effectiveness, if you've something that relates to innovation, you can use this text box here to highlight that to us. Again, we've got a question about private sector engagement. And if you respond yes, that you've involved the private sector, then you're able to tell us in narrative about how and why you've engaged the private sector in that project. So I've got a question here where someone's just saying that on the form, they can't see where it says which questions are optional and which questions are not. You'll notice that all of the questions in the form that are mandatory have a red asterisk next to them. So the questions without a red asterisk are those that are optional. So the next section goes on to Australian government support for the project. So as you all know, and we've been talking about you for quite a long time, it is a part of our agreement that you acknowledge Australian government support for the implementation of your projects. And as you know, being accountable to your project participants, to your stakeholders, and being transparent with them about where funds for projects come from is a really key part of how we want to deliver the ANCP. So when you give us an example here of how you acknowledged Australian government support for the project, it should be specific to this project. So here you might want to tell us about in-country, where with project participants and so forth, where you have acknowledged Australian government support for this project. But similarly, you might want to tell us about some communications that were developed domestically here in Australia. We mostly like to see those domestic examples at the header level, and we like to see the in-country examples here in the project. But if you have a couple of things that you've been doing, then feel free to highlight both domestic and international here at the project level. So you'll see that we have the opportunity for you to also upload a file here. So this is where you might have a screenshot from your website or Twitter or a publication that you produced, and you can provide that as an upload, or alternatively pop a URL in that we can follow and have a little look at anything that might be on the web. The next section on gender and disability is unchanged from last year. So for the most part, so again, we just ask you to consider if the OECD DAC gender and disability marker, or sorry, the DAC marker anyway for gender, we just ask you to consider if the one that you had in the ad plan is still relevant, or whether or not you need to revise it to something else. So you can use the definition and select principal, significant or not targeted. And then similarly for disability inclusion, we're using the same markers now that we have been using in this year's ad plan form. So that's mainstream, targeted, twin track or not targeted. So there's definitions there, and it's just a chance for you to revise as compared to your 2018-19 ad plan. The following questions, again, are similar to last year. Yes, no, were Indigenous people involved? Indigenous people and ethnic minorities or ethnic minorities involved in the project? And then we get on to the beneficiaries section. Again, it's going to show you here the number that you told us in the ad plan, the number of people you were expecting to reach in this project. Okay, I'm going to go back. We've got another question that if you change the gender markers, do you need to explain why? So I think yes, if you're revising the gender marker, then the project variations question at the top of the project is a great place for you to explain to us why you've changed the gender marker. Alternatively, you'll see right at the end of the form, we also have an other information box, so you can pop any narrative information like that in the other information section. So getting on to beneficiary numbers. So first it's going to show you that the number that was in the ad plan, and then the box next to it is going to add up all of the data that you put in underneath and show us that. So here we come to our disaggregated beneficiary data box. And again, this is the same as last year. So male, female, other, and, you know, adult, child, and then people with disabilities and people without disabilities. We always remind you not to double count. So if you've counted a boy with a disability, don't also count them as a boy, because we just want the total direct number of beneficiaries that you've reached, and we don't want to double count any individuals. So that is the same for all of these beneficiary disaggregation that we come along to. So here we ask you for Indigenous peoples and ethnic minorities, and we ask for that disaggregation there. And then we come down to the family planning section, where if you say, yes, this project includes an element of family planning, we then just ask you to give us some disaggregated data for family planning beneficiaries. Next, we get to the point where we talk about DAC codes. So this has changed a little bit since last year, so that it reflects the way we've started gathering data in this year's ad plan. So first off, it's going to show you the up to 3 DAC codes that you listed for this project. It's going to show you that from the ad plan, just to remind you, so you don't have to toggle between 2 forms. So it's going to show you the 3 that you put in, and then it's going to give you a chance to list those DAC codes again, and we're hoping that they should be the same and that you haven't dramatically changed the focus of your project. But now it's going to ask you to give us the percentage of expenditure by DAC code. It's going to ask you as well then to list the SDGs. We didn't collect SDGs in last year's ad plan, in the 2018-19 ad plan. This year was the first year we did it, but we think it's great for us to retrospectively gather this where we can. Our advice for the percentage of expenditure on the DAC codes and the SDGs is the same advice that we gave you at ad plan time. And this is really to use your best estimate. You know, we think most of you should have a pretty good understanding of the budget for these projects and what your funds are going towards. So here, make that estimate. Okay, there was, you know, a health and a health education component to this project, and it was around about 50-50 for each of those things. We don't need for you to give us the, you know, incredibly detailed 62.459%. You can feel free to round that down to, you know, 60-40 split, or even a 62-38% or whatever it is. Feel free to round those figures and just use your best guess based on, you know, you're familiar with your budgets and expenditure for these things. This information we know is adding a new layer of reporting for you, but it's really, really valuable for the ANCP team to be able to adequately report to our internal thematic areas. So I'll give you an example. Up until now, if you've used a family planning code for your project, we've had no way of figuring out whether or not 5% of your funds or 95% of your funds went to that family planning activity. So when we've been reporting to parliamentary committees and so forth on family planning activities, we've not been able to accurately answer the question, how much, you know, Australian aid money was spent on family planning. So this will really help us accurately answer those questions. and then help us be able to give, great reports to multilateral or global bodies that we report to on Australian aid expenditure. The next section is the funding summary. So here, this is not going to be automatically input for you. This is the time when you have to start entering the data so that the header level form can tally this all up for you. So there are definitions for what we want you to put in each of these boxes and the years that it relates to. So hopefully you can use those definitions to put in here how much you actually spent on this project, and then include your other figures such as how much of the total ANCP funds related to DM&E, and then add in on top of that your co-contribution of funds from the Australian community that if you have contributed to this project, and then other funding sources, so other institutional donors, foreign donors, other NGOs, philanthropic bodies, whatever they may be, or in fact other DFAT funding, and add that into that contributions from other donors. One thing that is new this year compared to last year is we have inserted the field where you can tell us about interest that you rolled over from the previous year that then you have actually expended. So for years, we haven't been asking for you to acquit that, but now we need that to be able to make sure all the dollars tally up. As we go down, we ask you to give us a breakdown by country of where you've spent that money. That's the same as last year. There's no change here. And the system will automatically check that all of the totals tally up to the same figures that you've given us in the tables above for dollars and beneficiaries. Finally, the final two sections here, one is the evaluation section. So where you've undertaken an evaluation for this project, there's the opportunity for you to give us the evaluation, some stats and figures on the evaluation, and then upload the document. And the final section at the bottom of the form, the final narrative box, is other information. So anything you couldn't fit into any of the boxes above that you need to explain, the other information section is there to help you. I've had a question on what is the DM&E validation. So once you enter your DM&E expenditure amount, the system is automatically going to check to see that you haven't spent more than 10%. Actually, that is incorrect. I'm going to have to check that for you, Chris, because that validation should be at the header level, but I don't believe we need it at the project level. So at the header level, the system's going to make sure you haven't spent more than 10% of your grant, but at the project level, we should not need that validation. So I'm going to check that and see if the Smarty Grants team might help me adjust it. Good pickup, thank you. Finally, at the very, very end of the form, and after this I'm going to leave you be, is the indicators section. So those of you who are involved in the monitoring, evaluation and learning framework reference group, you've been speaking a lot about indicators and what indicators we might like to have for the ANCP program going forward. Because that conversation is still ongoing, we have not changed any of the indicators for this year. We know you've been busily collecting this data all year. So the indicators are all the same as they were last year, but please do stay tuned because we really expect that next year, once the refresh of the MELF is complete, that there will be changes to these indicators and new ones for you to start using in your reporting for the 2019-20 financial year. So that brings us to the end of the project level report, and that's really also the end of the presentation for today. So we've probably got a very short amount of time if there are any burning questions. Otherwise, you can contact our team at ancp.dfat.gov.au, or you can give us a call on 02 61785 888 during business hours, and we can answer any of your questions. We really hope to see lots of you next week at the performance report information session. So we look forward to seeing you in person, those of you who can make it next week. And any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call.
Thanks, Mighty, and thanks everyone for joining us. Now please stay and complete a quick survey.